The year is 2157, and Odyssey 1, Earth's last hope for survival, is on a critical mission to Saturn's moon Titan. The spacecraft must gather natural resources to produce clean energy and reverse the planet's environmental collapse. The journey takes years, with the crew spending most of it in hibernation, only waking every 90 days for routine checks and system maintenance. After 9 months of this cycle, John is jolted awake by the usual beeps and reminders from the ship's AI. Groggy, he listens as the system warns him that the hibernation medicine could cause nausea and disorientation. Still adjusting, John tries to take a moment to regain his senses, but Captain Franks barks at him to get to work. With a resigned sigh, John stumbles to the shower. Minutes later, he joins Franks and fellow crew member Nash to start the daily checks. As they check the ship systems, a message from Earth comes through, wishing them happy holidays and reminding them to complete their psych evaluations. John distractedly checks his private inbox, hoping for a message from his girlfriend, Zoe. His heart sinks. There's nothing. During his psych evaluation, John drifts off in his thoughts about Zoe. When the AI asks what he misses most, he absent-mindedly replies, fresh air. It's only later, when speaking to Nash, that he confesses something more troubling. He's forgotten Zoe's last name. Nash assures him it's just the effects of hibernation-induced confusion, nothing to worry about. John goes back to work, but the nagging thought lingers. Then, during a routine maintenance task, a memory of the party where he first met Zoe surfaces, and with it, her last name. He feels an odd sense of relief. With the maintenance complete, the trio sends a report to Earth, confirming all systems are functioning. They return to their hibernation pods, ready for another 90-day sleep cycle. As John drifts off, his mind rewinds to a pivotal moment, the second time he saw Zoe, at a presentation about the Titan mission. The presentation detailed the ship's slingshot maneuver around Jupiter that would propel them toward Titan, bringing hope for Earth's future. The next time John wakes, he feels more determined to maintain a healthy routine. He eats well, exercises, and begins his tasks. But during a quiet moment, he hears a voice calling his name. Startled, John follows the sound but finds nothing. Then, the ship starts to tremble. The lights flicker, and the AI blares a warning. Screws rain from the ceiling, and a nearby panel rattles violently. Reaching out to steady it, John is knocked out when the panel crashes down onto him. In the darkness of unconsciousness, John dreams of Zoe, tears streaming down her face. When he awakens, Franks and Nash are standing over him. Franks looks concerned. They ask him what happened, but John doesn't have an answer. He was the only one awake during the incident. As they investigate the damage, John crawls into the hole left by the fallen panel, discovering extensive internal damage to the ship's components. When they check the exterior cameras, they notice part of the hull is damaged as well. Strangely, there's no recorded moment of impact, and Earth sent no alerts. Franks orders a reset of the system, but everything checks out. He decides to proceed with the mission as planned, instructing them to carry on with repairs. John is tasked with recording a detailed message for Houston about the situation. As he speaks into the camera, he drifts again into thoughts of Zoe, recalling their third meeting at a cafe where she helped him beat a tricky level in a video game. Their connection deepened as they talked. John shared that he had no family, a fact that made him a prime candidate for the Titan mission. Later, Nash voices his doubts about continuing the mission. He fears the ship has suffered structural stress, a condition that could lead to catastrophic decompression. John doesn't want to believe it. After all, Zoe was one of the engineers who designed the ship. But Nash persists, warning that if the ship is compromised, it could explode during the slingshot maneuver around Jupiter. Franks dismisses Nash's concerns, insisting the crew stick to protocol until they hear back from Earth. Tensions rise. As John works on repairs, he's haunted by more memories of Zoe. He recalls the night he first stayed at her apartment, a night that blurred the lines of their relationship. Just as John becomes lost in thought, Nash approaches him with a bold proposition. Instead of sleeping for 90 days, Nash suggests they set their hibernation timers for 89 days and 12 hours, waking up before Franks and rerouting the ship back to Earth. John balks at the suggestion, calling it mutiny. Desperate, Nash tells John a chilling story. He recounts an incident at a research facility in Antarctica where a crew discovered a massive crack in the ice shelf heading toward their station. They wanted to evacuate, but their commander pulled a gun on them, forcing them to stay. When rescuers arrived, they found the entire crew dead, shot in the head, with the commander nowhere to be found. The story unnerves John, but he agrees to help Nash, on one condition. If they wake up and find more evidence of damage, they'll take action. As John sets his timer, he remembers the professional front he maintained during lectures about the Titan mission, even while secretly seeing Zoe. Now, as he drifts back from hibernation, a strange vision flickers before him. Zoe, standing aboard Odyssey 1. But as quickly as she appears, she's gone, leaving John questioning whether it was real or just another trick of his hibernation-addled mind. John's hands trembled as Nash approached. He was seeing things again, but this time he didn't want to lie. Admitting the truth, John confessed he was hallucinating, causing Nash to insist they should return home. The duo made their way to the bridge to search for any incoming messages from Earth, but the silence was deafening. Staring out into Jupiter's vast beauty, they took in the sight, but it didn't calm John. He wasn't ready to follow Nash's plan, not without proof. Nash, frustrated, argued, their voices rising until they were interrupted by Franks. Franks, awake earlier than expected, had overheard their conversation. Sending Nash off to work, Franks leaned in close and whispered something into his ear, forcing Nash to leave the room without protest. John watched uneasily as Franks sat beside him, pretending to be friendly, offering a drink. Franks reassured John that if any real danger arose, he would abort the mission. But the tension lingered, making the atmosphere heavy. Meanwhile, Nash paced nervously in the kitchen, stress building as his mind raced. When John entered for a meal, Nash's anxiety spilled over, demanding John's support. But John refused, his patience wearing thin. Nash snapped, shouting about the ship's damage, just as Franks entered. Franks wanted to know if they could complete the slingshot maneuver without Nash, and John confirmed that the computer had already calculated the necessary math. Without hesitation, Franks dragged Nash away, warning him that Houston would hear about his disobedience. As John continued through his day, thoughts of Zoe overwhelmed him. Needing a moment alone, he secluded himself in a dark room to brood. Her memory clung to him like a shadow, but he had to focus. Returning to the broken panel, John saw it had been hastily taped to the ceiling. Determined to fix it, he entered the hole and discovered sparking cables. Then, without warning, the gadget in his hand began to fail, shooting out sparks and loosening its screws. The hole cracked, and in a terrifying moment, space began to pull at him. John struggled to hold on, but the force was too much, and his body was sucked into the cold void. But it wasn't real. He awoke in a cold sweat, realizing it was another hallucination. Shaken, John barely had time to gather his thoughts before Franks announced it was time for the slingshot maneuver. Nash, desperate, begged John to reconsider, but John was beyond listening. He was ready. As they reached the bridge, memories of his conversation with Zoe crept back in, their discussion about moths and survival instinct. Together with Franks, John manned the controls. Nash, still not trusted, was only allowed to watch. The ship's thrusters roared to life as they began the complex calculations needed to slingshot around Jupiter. But just as they reached the critical moment, the AI blared an alert: system overload. Despite the warning, Franks ordered John to continue. In the sparking panel hole, chaos reigned as the damaged unit threatened to explode. The ship shook violently, but just before catastrophe struck, John pressed the final button. The slingshot was successful. They had made it. With their course set for Titan, the crew celebrated with a drink. Later, as John performed routine maintenance, something unsettling happened. While checking the radios, he heard a strange noise. Placing his ear closer, a voice suddenly yelled his name. Startled, he rushed to show the others, but they all denied using the comms. Nash suggested it was another hallucination, but the radar showed nothing for miles. Franks, calm as ever, declared it was time to go back into hibernation. John's next dream took him back to the moment he'd learned he was chosen for the mission. He told Zoe, expecting joy, but her face only reflected sadness. She admitted she'd broken their agreement and fallen in love with him. John's response was cold, insisting the mission was more important than their relationship. Zoe, heartbroken, revealed she had voted against him in the selection process, not wanting him to leave. John had left without a word. When John woke, he felt worse than ever, disoriented and nauseous. He ran laps around the ship to clear his head, but thoughts of Zoe haunted him. Suddenly, he saw her, standing nearby. Telling himself it was only in his mind, he followed her, consumed by the vision. Franks intercepted him, warning that Nash had found something wrong with the reactor. John's anger flared, frustrated by the endless strain of hibernation. After calming down, he joined Nash at the reactor room. The readings showed an escalating output, a small issue but one that could grow worse. Nash, however, seemed lost in his own thoughts, doubting even his own memories. He confessed he couldn't remember basic details, like his parents' names, and started to poke at John's memories of Zoe, hinting that she had moved on. That was the final straw. John snapped, shoving Nash and yelling at him to stop. In the midst of the confrontation, John realized something terrifying. The numbers on Nash's screen weren't real. Nash had hallucinated them. Franks called them to the bridge, where the error was confirmed. But the mystery deepened. Someone had issued a low-level command to sabotage the reactor. Franks revealed the last login belonged to John, but he suspected Nash had used John's credentials. As tension mounted, Franks pulled out a gun, ordering everyone back into hibernation. John reluctantly climbed into his pod, but before he drifted to sleep, he watched in horror as Franks attacked Nash. The two fought violently, with Nash's head repeatedly slammed against John's pod. As John fell into unconsciousness, his last memory was of Nash's bloodied face. The next time John woke up, he was sicker than ever, vomiting as vivid flashes of Frank's killing Nash assaulted his mind. John stares at his reflection on the polished walls. His mind races with uncertainty, but before he can drift too far into thought, Frank surprises him from behind. The captain, still gripping his gun tightly, looks concerned but resolute. Frank tells John that Nash, one of the crew members, became too unstable, so he knocked him out and locked him in a pod until they reached Titan. John protests, swearing he's fine, but Frank refuses to lower his weapon, warning that John could be next to lose control. As they talk, Frank drops another bombshell. Nash's terrifying story about the crew left stranded in Antarctica had been completely wrong. The commander hadn't abandoned the crew. They had refused to leave, forcing the commander to march out into the ice alone, eventually succumbing to the cold. The gunshot wounds found in the commander's autopsy? Self-inflicted. This stark revelation sends a chill through John, but Frank remains steadfast. The mission is still on, and he sends John off to work. While checking the ship systems, John notices something strange. His arm feels heavy, and when he inspects it, his veins have turned an ominous dark color. Panic washes over him as his arm begins to mutate grotesquely, veins bursting and blood spewing everywhere. He screams in agony, but in an instant, the hallucination vanishes. Shaken and disoriented, John tries to collect himself when he hears voices calling his name. But when he looks around, no one is there. Seeking some semblance of normalcy, John heads to the kitchen, only for Frank to meet him there. The captain points out John's trembling hand, before casually bringing up Zoe. John's heart sinks. Zoe, the woman he thought he loved. But before he can stop him, Frank drops a truth bomb that shakes John to his core. Zoe wasn't interested in him. She had been sent by the mission committee to monitor his mental health before the launch. John's mind reels as Frank lists every moment he thought was genuine, every encounter with Zoe. Frank knows it all with creepy precision, revealing he was part of the committee too. Refusing to accept this reality, John storms away to work on the radio. His thoughts are consumed with Zoe, as doubt creeps into his memories. Was any of it real? As if in response to his confusion, someone from Houston suddenly contacts him through the radio. John eagerly tries to reply, but they can't hear him, and the line goes dead. Frustrated, John's mind begins to fracture even further. Frank catches up with him and berates him for thinking he could contact Earth from so far away. He plays back security footage showing John talking to thin air. No one on the other end. John's panic grows, but Frank calmly shows him how far they are from Earth, a vast expanse of space stretching endlessly in every direction. Frank orders John to return to hibernation, but John refuses, locking himself in another room and demanding to see Nash. Frank, annoyed but calm, promises to take John to see him. However, the moment John unlocks the door, Frank ambushes him, slamming him against the wall and threatening to kill him if he doesn't comply. John's fear morphs into raw survival instinct, and remembering what happened to Nash, he lashes out. A violent struggle ensues. Both men fight for control of the gun, fists flying and blood dripping. Frank nearly chokes John to death, but with a desperate punch, John breaks free, grabbing the gun in the process. John, breathless and panicking, demands answers about Nash, but Frank only laughs maniacally. Spiraling into madness, John wanders aimlessly around the ship, haunted by visions of memories flashing before his eyes, Frank's mocking voice echoing in his ears. Desperation takes over as John struggles to distinguish reality from hallucination. Sensing his vulnerability, Frank attacks again, but this time John overpowers him, smashing Frank's nose before knocking him out cold with the butt of the gun. John rushes to the bridge, scanning the cameras for any sign of Nash, but finds nothing. Suddenly, Frank appears behind him again, and in a blind rage, John brutally beats him until the captain lies dead on the floor. John, shaking with adrenaline and fear, turns to the ship's AI for answers. To his shock, the AI informs him that Nash is alive, on the bridge. Confused and disoriented, John pulls up the crew manifest, only to be met with a horrifying truth. The crew consists of only one person, him. His full name is John Frank Nash, and he's been hallucinating the entire time. The weight of the realization crushes him. He's alone. There were no other astronauts. No Nash. No Franks. The lines between reality and delusion blur, and John feels himself slipping into madness. Just as he's on the verge of a breakdown, the radio crackles to life. Zoe's voice. John freezes. Could it be real? He explains everything, how he's losing his mind, how the others weren't real. Zoe reassures him, explaining that he had been accidentally overdosed with medication, causing vivid hallucinations. She confirms what the AI revealed. He's the only crew member. But that's not all. She delivers one final, crushing blow. The ship never left Earth. John had been put into a training facility in New Mexico, buried 1,000 feet underground in a perfect replica of the ship. The mission was a psychological test, meant to study the effects of isolation and hibernation on the human mind. Zoe didn't know either, or she would have stopped it. Stunned, John asks about the things he saw. Jupiter, the slingshot maneuver. It was all a simulation. The damage to the ship was caused by an earthquake, not an accident in space. Zoe assures him that it's finally over, instructing him to walk through the airlock and into the rescue tunnel. John prepares to leave, but just as he's about to step out, Franks appears again. He tells John not to believe Zoe, insisting that she is the hallucination, and John's mind is simply crafting a comforting lie. John, desperate to escape, ignores Franks, steps into the airlock, and declares his desire to go home. The AI opens the final door, and John steps out into an underground tunnel. As the fake ship looms above him, the ground starts to shake. Machines begin digging, and voices call out, promising rescue. He climbs a ladder, frantically signaling his location, but as he reaches for a light, a memory snaps into focus, the moth and its obsession with light. Suddenly, the truth becomes clear. He really is in space. His body is ejected into the cold void as darkness engulfs him, the haunting reality of his situation finally setting in. Slingshot delivers a chilling blend of psychological horror and sci-fi thrills, where isolation warps reality and survival teeters on the edge of sanity. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more intense recaps from Movies Unboxed.